Good morning, everybody. I am really glad to be here with you today. It's been a long journey to actually be here. Of course, you all know about the reason why we are online and not in the flesh. So, despite all the difficulties, we are here, and I think I have to produce a very significant menu for today. I have some really interesting scholars that were so kind as to accept the invitation that I've extended to them, and I couldn't have done it. Of course, I couldn't organize today's online conference without the invaluable help of Belén Galván, whom you've seen here. She is the secretary and managing so many things behind the curtains. And I would also like to thank Dr. Martin Simonsen and Dr. Raul Montero, because they've been so much help. They have actually organized these conference. 4 years they were the ones organizing it. It's the 5th edition, but I am so happy to be able to introduce to you today. And I would also, of course, like to thank the Department of English, German, and Translation and Interpretation Studies of the University of Basque Country, because they have funded this event. So I would also like to thank you for being here, obviously. After each session, there will be time for questions and comments, and I would really love for you to participate in a debate. So please don't be shy. You can use the chat box to type in your questions and comments, or you can raise your hand. There is a button that you can just click on to virtually raise it, and then once we say your name, you can then open your microphone and just speak and ask questions. The program for today, as I said, I think you'd find it very, very interesting, and we're looking at many different topics. The general overarching topic, of course, is myth in the arts, and the emphasis on the plural here is very significant, because I really wanted to have people here come and talk about different arts, not just literature. For some of us, of course, literature is like the base, like default art. Of course, there are so many other arts that we absolutely need to explore more. So today's panel, we're going to have the panel with Nagore Sanchez Ruiz, Nerea Unda Garcia, and Belén Galván, and the general topic here you can see is adaptations of myths to different screens and also literature. Then we are going to have at 3 o'clock Dr. José García Soler with a lecture in Spanish on Ulysses and women, female characters in the Odyssey, seen from the point of view of comedy. And then at 4 o'clock we have Dr. Idel Porter from the University of Castilla-La Mancha, and she's going to introduce us to the myth of poetic mead and its relationship with the art of skaldic verse. So the relationship between, if you like, alcoholic beverage and poetry. Then we will have at 5 o'clock p.m. Dr. Paul Mitchell from the Catholic University of Valencia, with a lecture on different screen adaptations of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And at 6 o'clock, we're going to have another keynote by Dr. Noelia Diaz-Vicedo from Queen's College, and she's going to lecture on the poetics of sexual difference, women, poetry, and myth. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce again in Spanish, and then I'll just say a few words in Basque, and we'll be ready to start. Buenos días a todos y todas. Me gustaría daros las gracias a todos por estar aquí y sobre todo me gustaría agradecerle a Belén Galván, que la podéis ver aquí, es la secretaria de esta jornada. sin la cual, desde luego, yo no podría haber organizado todo esto. Ha sido complicado, como podéis imaginaros, pero bueno, yo creo que hay que sacarle el máximo partido a las nuevas tecnologías, a la tecnología en general, y eso no tiene que quitarle la humanidad y tal vez el calor humano, ¿no? a un evento como este. Así que vamos a sacarle todo el provecho que podamos. Podéis, por supuesto, participar después de una de las intervenciones. En este caso creo que vamos a dejar las preguntas para el final, pero por favor os animo a que participéis con preguntas, con comentarios. Podéis hacerlo a través del chat o podéis hacerlo activando el micro. Os rogaría que antes de hacerlo, sin embargo, levantarais la mano, hay un botón para hacerlo. Y cuando os demos el turno de habla, por favor, abrís el micro y simplemente habláis. Me gustaría también agradecerle la ayuda a dos compañeros de departamento míos, el doctor Martin Simons y el doctor Raúl Montero, que han sido realmente los fundadores de esta jornada y la han organizado en sus 4 ediciones anteriores. Esta es la 5ª edición. Y también me gustaría agradecerle al Departamento de Filología Inglesa y Alemana, Traducción e Interpretación de la Universidad del País Vasco, que es quien ha aportado los medios, a patrocinar este evento. Y bueno, pues finalmente nada, simplemente deciros que las propuestas que tenemos para vosotros hoy vienen de muy distintas disciplinas y ángulos diferentes maneras de ver, de mirar a las artes y al mito en su relación, y que algunas de las ponencias tendrán que ver con textos poéticos, otras con textos fílmicos, textos televisivos y literarios. Tenemos una sesión a las 3 de la tarde, otra a las 4, otra a las 5, otra a las 6. Tenéis en el programa los nombres de los ponentes y los títulos de las intervenciones. Tenemos desde la Universidad del País Vasco, tenemos a la doctora... Uy, perdón. Es que, lo siento. La doctora María José García Soler, con una intervención sobre Odiseo y las mujeres, los personajes femeninos de la Odisea vistos por la comedia. Me parece que esta es la única intervención en castellano. Luego a las 4 tenemos a la doctora de la Universidad de Castilla-La Mancha con una intervención sobre el arte del verso escáldico y su relación con el mito de este brebaje que induce a la poesía. Y luego tenemos a las 5 de la tarde el doctor Paul Mitchell de la Universidad Católica de Valencia con una intervención sobre la adaptación de la novela de Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, a la gran y pequeña pantalla. Y por último tenemos a la doctora Díaz Vicedo de Queen Mary's College, que nos va a hablar sobre la poética de la diferencia sexual y la relación entre mujeres, poesía y mito. Bueno, os dejo entonces, bueno, voy a hablar ahora en euskera, pero rápidamente os voy a dejar en manos de Andoni, que va a ser Andoni Cosío, que va a ser el moderador de esta sesión y a quien le agradezco su colaboración. Bueno, eskerrik asko guztioi kongresu honetara bartaratzagatik, pozten gaitu zuek gure artean izateak eta momentu hau zuekin partekatzeak, egoera arraro hau kontuan hartuta. Ezoiko ikasturtea bizi dugu eta urtengo kongresua ere berezia izango da, modu virtualean egiten ari baikara. Dakizuenez, kongresu honetako helburua arteen eta mitoen arteko harremana aztertzea da. Eta, bueno, saio hauek zuen gustukoa izatea espero du. Mila esker. Bueno, Andoni, creo que ya puedo cederte la palabra. Vamos a apagar nosotras el vídeo y el micro.
Hi. So, good afternoon, everyone. Really glad to be here and to be able to present this interesting panel of emerging scholars. So we're going to start with Nagore. Nagore Sanchez-Ruiz is currently enrolled in the doctoral program of comparative literature and literary studies at the University of the Basque Country. She has always been fascinated by witches, and as a result, she wrote her master's dissertation on the representation of witchcraft and sexism in the Jacobean play The Witch of Edmonton and Arthur Miller's The Crucible. Her thesis is on the way Anglophone witches have been portrayed in television, focusing mainly on the modern series and films, where the role of witches eulogizes the femme fatale and the empowered and feminist woman. Today, she's going to talk about Of Covens and Spells, the revival of the traditional witch in the television series Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Thank you, Andoni. All right. Let's see. Hello, everyone. All right, so whenever we use the word witch, an ugly old woman wearing a pointy hat and carrying a broom comes to mind. This stereotype description of the witch owes its popularity to literature and film industry. However, as Mona Choyette explained in her book Sorcière de puissance invaincue des femmes, the first known representation of a woman flying on a broom is in the margin of Martin de Francy manuscript Le Champion des Dames. We can see there in the PowerPoint, okay, how the little witch looks slightly like a Halloween ornament. So, in 1939, Hollywood released the film adaptation of L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which presents this iconic villain, the Wicked Witch of the East. As we can see, she is wearing black clothes, she wears a pointy hat, and she has a green face and is quite ugly. The portrayal of witches as ugly and evil creatures has been quite popular in adaptation of fairy tales and children's films. For example, in Roald Dahl's film adaptation of The Witches or Disney's Hocus Pocus, but frankly differs from what a traditional witch was considered in the Middle Ages and early modern period. So indeed, traditional witches were considered to make a pact with the devil in order to serve him and cause problems in the village. For example, ruining the harvest, making the weather change, killing the neighbor's cattle. They were evil, but not necessarily ugly, nor they wear black clothes. With the passage of time, Hollywood has changed the depiction of witches and provided them with different looks and roles in various cinematic genres, from horror to romantic comedies, and little by little the characteristics of the traditional witches have disappeared, making way for witches who use their magic for the good, basically, and do not praise the devil. For instance, this can be appreciated in the acclaimed TV series Bewitched, or for example, Charmed. Nevertheless, lately, a new generation of witches have been born, both in film and television industry, and some characteristics of the traditional witches have been displayed, such as the pact with the devil and the familiar, among others. This is mainly seen in TV shows, such as American Horror Story Coven, and its sequel, American Horror Story Apocalypse, Salem, and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. So, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is a show streaming on Netflix, created by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, and is based on the comics of the same name. In this presentation, I will analyze the characteristics of the traditional witch that are clearly shown in the show. So, the first one is the coven and the devil. Alright, so first of all, we have the Sabbats. Witches have been considered to gather in groups from time immemorial and to make a pact with the devil. According to Louis Martin in his book History of Witchcraft, stories about the pact with the devil started to spread through Europe in the 9th century, when the Archbishop Inamor of Reims published a treatise in 860 warning about the dangers of magic. The assembly of witches was called a coven or a sabbat and gained popularity in the 15th century. Martin states that the main characteristics of these reunions are that they normally happened at night and in secret, hence why they were normally held in the forest or in a cave. In Sabbath, witches met in order to praise Satan and made a pact with him, denying God. Moreover, Norman Cohn adds in his book Europe's Inner Demons that they showed anti-human behavior by killing children, committing cannibalism, dancing, and ending the event in an orgy and copulating with the devil. In some countries, such as Spain, France, and Italy, it was believed that the witches mocked Christians and their God, disrespecting the main objects or symbols that the Catholic Church used, for example, the cross or the sacrament, and saying the prayers backwards. Sabbats predominantly occur on Thursday night, and it's celebrated two special dates: the pagan festivals of May Eve, which is called the Walpurgisnacht, celebrated the 30th of April, and Halloween, which is celebrated the 31st of October. In Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, the Coven of Satanic Witches is called the Church of the Night and emulates the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. Indeed, it is also led by a highest priest, and it was one of the churches that forms the Church of Darkness, which is like the biggest entity, the highest entity, and is managed by an anti-pope. This coven meets at night for different celebrations along the year. The most prominent example is the second episode of the season 1, where Sabrina attends her dark baptism. The dark baptism is a ceremony where the witch or warlock, age 16, signs the Dark Lord's or Satan's book with blood and promises to serve him in exchange of new powers. During this gathering, witches chant in Latin, and Sabrina is only wearing her undergarments. Besides, the need of blood for the ritual is commented by Sabrina's aunts, who get a goat in order to sacrifice it for the baptism. Regarding the orgies, in the TV show, the promiscuous nature of witches is not hidden, and even if in these reunions there is no sexual intercourse with the devil, it is implied by Aunt Zelda that witches should be virginal for their dark baptism. Furthermore, Sabrina's 16th birthday and dark baptism are on Halloween Day, which makes the whole celebration more special for them. Throughout the series, somehow, witches also mock Christians, calling God a false or a fake God, and laughing at all the Catholic beliefs, such as, for example, the use of the exorcism. Okay. Then we have Satan. The devil or Satan is an element of great importance in the witches' lives, as he was the reason why they had their powers and committed crimes in him. Martin affirms that the devil was believed to be a monstrous creature with horns or even a goat's body. In fact, the devil owns its physical appearance to all pagan religions, specifically the old European gods. The horns, the cloven hooves, and the tail were copied from the European gods, Themunor and Pan. Besides, the description of the devil that is given during the Middle Ages is not the same as the biblical Satan, and is related to folklore deities. One of the most common representations of the devil is the goat of Mendes, which is an Egyptian deity that has the shape of a goat and had the reputation of having sexual intercourses with his followers. The devil was also described as a black man from the 11th century onwards, or even an animal such as a cat, a toad, or a dog. Kohn also mentions that during the Sabbats, the devil was present as half human, half goat. In Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Satan is also referred to as Dark Lord or Lucifer, and he is depicted as half human, half goat. He actually is the head of a goat, body of a human, and hooves. Throughout the series, he recovers his human physique. Of course, witches have to obey the Dark Lord's orders and can't question him at all. However, Sabrina's sense of justice and need for freedom makes her question him all the time, getting herself into trouble. Right, moving on to the familiar, we could say that the relationship between demons and animals is very old, and was commonly believed that both demons and witches could change their own shape and transform them into diverse animals so that they could deceive others. The familiar spirit was a concept that coexisted with the idea of the coven. According to Martin, this concept became popular in the 14th century, mainly in England and Germany. These spirits were provided to the witches by the devil, and they helped them commit their crimes and mischief, taking the shape of domestic animals. Witches were thought to feed the familiars with their own blood in return of the assistance in their magical matters. So when a woman was accused of being a witch, she was stripped and examined by a group of men in order to search for the witch's teeth. This teeth was believed to serve the purpose of suckling the familiar. In addition, familiars took the shape of little animals, for instance a cat, although they could also have a non-material form. In the Netflix show, familiars are described as goblins that take the shape of animals and are the servants of the witches. It is implied that Sabrina has to pick a familiar from the registry book sent by the Coven's council before she attends dark baptism. The witch can also summon their familiar, which is what Sabrina finally does. So, when Sabrina's familiar appears in her bedroom, he's hiding in the shadows, but it's possible to distinguish a black long shape with claws that is able to talk. That's the picture on the right, and that then is transformed into a cat, Salem, the picture on the left. Salem can go back to its goblin shape whenever Sabrina is in danger, and is provided with a lot of strength and can destroy her enemies. Other familiars that appear in the TV show are a mouse, an iguana, a raven, a dog, and spiders, among others, as we can see a wide range of species. Familiars are not immortal, they can actually die, and they also die when their master perishes. In addition, the witch's teeth is not mentioned in the show, so there is no need to feed the familiar in this universe. So regarding cannibalism, it could be stated it was one of the main characteristics of witchcraft in popular Western culture, and it has had a big representation in fairy tales. According to Sika, in his article Cannibalism and Witchcraft in Early Modern Europe, probably the best example of the cannibal witch is the one from Hansel and Gretel by the Grimm brothers. In his article, Sika indicates that this figure represents the fear of Europeans of being cooked and eaten by other tribes. The reason why Europeans were so scared of this act had its origin between the 15th and 17th centuries and was due to all this anti-heretical polemic that occurred at that moment, the folklore that existed already about blood-sucking vampires and werewolves, and of course, due to the literature about ancient cannibals. So cannibalism was considered an act committed by those who weren't civilized. Sika adds that it was a metaphor for otherness, and as a result, those who did it were considered unusual, barbaric, or even demonic, even if one of the liturgical practices in Christian church was to eat the meat of Christ and to drink his blood. In addition, cannibalism became very popular in early modern Europe, as the evidence of the witch trials stated that many of the witches sucked human blood or ate their flesh. This was supposed to happen in the previously mentioned Sabbath, or with the Coven, where they had a feast and ate young children. Even if witch trials were not specifically a gender issue, it is true that most of the witches were female. As time went by, the witch was feminized and also demonized. As a result, she was represented in art as a savage or an evil mother, because she was the one who murdered children. Okay, so the act of cannibalism can be especially seen in episode 7 of season 1. In the show, committing cannibalism is a custom that witches have been doing since the beginning of times, as the Dark Lord commands it. So every year, the Church of the Night organizes the Feast of Feast, a celebration where one member of each of the 14 families in the Coven participates in a lottery. If they shall win, they will be considered a tribute, a queen, and they will be sacrificed and eaten by the Coven. It is considered an honor to be chosen. Nevertheless, due to her human nature, Sabrina does not support the idea, and she refuses to commit this act, basically. All right, moving on to the well-known Mark of the Witch. It could be mentioned that it's one of the most fundamental characteristics in order to discover who a witch was. So, as mentioned before, when a woman was accused of being a witch, she was stripped to search for some marks that she may have, such as an extra teeth to fit her familiar. Nevertheless, the witch hunters also looked for many marks, because witches, as has been explained already by Martin also, they were supposed to get a mark once they decide to join Satan. In fact, the elect mark was nothing but a mole or even a freckle or a birthmark. In this show, witches are supposed to have a mark in their bodies that acknowledge them as sorcerers. However, Sabrina does not have this mark, as she was born half witch, half mortal, and humanity is present in her. This is seen in episode 3, season 1, when Sabrina is summoned to the court of witches, and she hires a lawyer who objects to the accusation, and due to the girl's human nature, he wants her to be tried in a human court. The witches' court then say that, in that case, Sabrina should prove that her dominant nature is human by undergoing trial by water or being stripped in order to search for the mark. Okay, to conclude with this presentation, I like to say that witches have been represented in numerous ways and in different genres, in the film industry and on TV, basically, most of the times omitting the traditional elements, such as, for example, the coven, or the pact with the devil, or the familiar. Although it is true that in children's films and horror films, such as, for example, Suspiria or The Witch, a New England folktale, maintain these elements in order to cause repulsion and fear. As a result, the portrayal of witches have varied from the ugly and vindictive villain in children's films to the terrifying entity that torments people in horror films, and to the romantic woman who falls in love with a mortal in romantic comedies. The TV industry started creating friendlier witches who could somehow perfectly be roles. For instance, with TV shows like Bewitched or Charmed, having heroines, the so-called white witches, who use the magic for the good and never really harm anyone or commit such acts like cannibalism or murder. It is true, however, that some of these witches are always accompanied by a cat. Sometimes the cat is black, not all the times, though they don't really mention if it is their familiar or not. Nevertheless, the mark of the witch is not normally present, nor the Sabbats or serving the devil. Lately, both film and television industry have started to slowly add these traditions to the productions, creating morally dubious witches somehow. Okay, so as we can see, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa's Chilling Adventures of Sabrina has taken a dark turn somehow, and distant itself from the other TV show with the same name, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, adding dark elements typical of the Anglophone traditional witch, introducing the spectator to a magical world full of demons, familiars, covens, and anti-human behavior. It could be said, however, that even if Sabrina shares some traditional witch traits, she's still modernized, as she is an empowered feminist young woman, and her own morality prevents her from committing certain acts like cannibalism or murder. And also, she doesn't want to lose her freedom to Satan. Okay, so that was all. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nagore, for your interesting talk. I already have a couple of questions, but we'll leave that for the very end.
Okay, thank you.
It was very interesting. And I didn't know that reference about the manuscript elimination.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you like a couple of things about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So now let us welcome our next speaker, Nerea Unda, who is currently a PhD student at the University of the Basque Country. Nerea's interests range from fantastic worlds, Gothic, Jewish, folklore, to children's literature. Lately, she has studied the comparative feature of The Wandering Jew and Harry Potter with Bangor University, Wales, and the father archetype in James Joyce's Ulysses, and Harry Potter with Eva Joyce Association, and different Gothic aspects as well as character portrayals in the world of Harry Potter with the International Gothic Association in Manchester University and Sheffield University, respectively. Specifically, her work examines the dichotomies and comparative postmodern aspects found in the novels of The Boy Who Survived. She has also enjoyed 4 months at the University of Växjö, Sweden, developing her dissertation. She's going to talk about Sirius Black, the wanderer who chose the light.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm trying to share my PDF, but it's just not. See, this was my worst fear. Let me see if I can do it now. Can you see now?
Yes, that's all right.
That's perfect. Shall I do it bigger or that's enough?
Actually, I don't think you can, so it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Right, so well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I myself, this is the very first presentation that I'm gonna be doing online, and yeah, I'm nervous. Like, I have to admit, I'm nervous. But anyway, thank you all for joining us today again. So first of all, let me address the fact that you will see a difference between the title announced on this conference's beautiful poster and my presentation, and that is because light as such can have many different meanings. The one I will be referring to here today is closely related to the light, which goes with a religious or even godly environment and has the power to redeem, hence this light change. But moving on, the purpose of this paper is not to analyze exclusively the character of the Wanderer as a legendary entity or its meaning, but to explore how it was adopted and adapted by J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter. More specifically, in the character of Sirius Black, hence the title, The Wanderer Who Chose the Light, but specifically as well, Sirius Black as the main title, and how the transgression is reinterpreted. Therefore, the next 4 aspects will be of vital importance: the character of the Wanderer, the name Sirius Black, the word light, but most importantly, the verb to choose. The first aspect focuses on the character of the Wanderer. In order to understand this character, a brief summary of the origin of said legend and its subsequent evolution is necessary to understand the fundamental characteristics of the Wanderer. Before approaching J.K. Rowling's view of such character, there needs to be a previous deconstruction. This medieval legend, retold by Tichelard, tells us that the Wanderer is based on the Wandering Jew, a Jew shoemaker named Ahasuerus, whom God punished for not helping him on his way to the cross. The punishment imposed was that he would roam incessantly across the earth without any rest, not even death, until God returned to earth on the day of the final judgment, when the curse at the end of the wandering will be broken and there will be redemption for Ahasuerus. Right. Let's see. I don't know if I click. There you go. But it was not until this character appeared in the novel by Matthew Lewis, The Monk, when he really took the form by which we know him today. Lewis described the character that gives life to the Wanderer as a man without direction, condemned to roam constantly from one place to another without being able to stay more than one night in the same place, friendless, wishing to die but unable to do so, creating feelings of rejection and terror in those who contemplated him. This is the extract in the novel The Monk, where we see those describing his suffering and roaming. And you can see, if you pay attention to the PDF, phrases such as not permitted to pass more than a fortnight in the same place, no friend, death eludes me, meaning that he cannot die, and last but not least, Mark at the very end of the paragraph. And it was because precisely Lewis who branded the forehead of his character with the mark of the fiery cross, and who in this way may be said to have compared the figure of the wanderer with the biblical character of Cain. Both have a very strong and godly bond, as both have been marked. Thus, in the same way that Cain, by killing his brother, is marked by God, Lewis got his wanderer to act as the perfect metaphor to imply exile. God made Cain the eternal errant because the mark of his forehead had precisely that functionality, that the rest of humanity would recognize him, judge him, but never kill him, in the same way as the mark on the forehead of the wanderer reveals his identity as he roams around the world. Therefore, if Cain was perceived as an ungodly figure because of a fratricide, now the character of the wanderer was also analyzed under the same lens, even if his cause or motive were different. Still, unlike Cain, the character of the wanderer did not kill anyone, and in a reasonable way it would not be expected such a punishment for someone who did not carry out any blood crime. Excuse me. In fact, in the novel The Monk, this character helped another, the bleeding nun. The kindness shown by the wanderer, despite its cruel destiny, causes certain compassion to surface in the reader. While it is true that Lewis was the one who traced the dark features of this character, he also endowed it with compassion and kindness. Analyzing several of the aspects that can be applied to the wanderer, it is clear that this character is condemned for a sin that he committed, that endlessly wanders, and that he finds no salvation or forgiveness since he cannot die until his moment arrives. In addition, he is recognized by the mark on his body, but also by the kindness in his heart. Everyone seems to know his story, but nobody seems to take pity on the wanderer. The second aspect will give us a clear hint of who I will be speaking about today, Sirius Black, the character of the Harry Potter novels. Sirius Black's name is mentioned at the very beginning of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, for he is the owner, I don't know if you remember this, but he's the owner of the flying motorcycle who lends it to Hagrid to carry Harry in at the very beginning of that same book and that same film. But as readers, we do not really pay too much attention to this name until the third novel, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Sirius Black, a terrible and very dangerous fugitive from the maximum security prison Azkaban, who seeks Harry Potter to avenge his lord and master, Lord Voldemort. Towards the end of the novel, we discover, spoiler alert, A. Sirius has never actually had the slightest intention of hurting the Potters, let alone his son. B. That during all this time, who really has been in the spotlight was Ron Scabbers, who is actually the animagus Peter Pettigrew, thanks to which Voldemort managed to find the Potters and almost killed Harry. And C. Most importantly, that Sirius is innocent. But it is not until the fifth book, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Sirius' story is glimpsed and the reader is aware of the past of this character. In said book, the Order has established its lair and headquarters in the former Black home, and as Sirius is still in search and capture by the Ministry of Magic, he remains there too, surrounded by the memories of his youth, a family that distinguished between different social classes, Muggle-born, half-blood, pure-blood, and that considered Slytherin as the house to belong to in order to honor the wizard caste. Sirius, who belongs to the House of Gryffindor, is banished from his kindred, uprooted from the family tree for not believing in the values of the Blacks. For the first time, the reader knows the tragedy of him growing up in an abusive home he was forced to run away from at a very young age. Sirius's mark may not be seen at first glance, banished by his family for not following the lineage his last name honors, condemned by the rest of the wizarding community for believing he has broken the so-established rules. It is clear that Sirius Black is a wanderer, and his mark is his last name from which he cannot escape, Black, like an indelible ink stain. The third aspect deals with the eternal dichotomy between good and evil, light and dark. Sirius reveals himself against his family and escapes from the black tradition of hating and stigmatizing those who do not follow the pure blood ideals of certain wizards and witches. Unlike his cousins and brothers, he does not join Voldemort's army to gain power. Instead, together with his best friends, conforms the First Order of the Phoenix, and then, later on during the Second Voldemort War, abides by Dumbledore's rule of living confined to 12th Grimmauld Place, giving up his own freedom if by doing so he's helping Harry order to defeat Voldemort. In this case, confinement is erring in itself, because there is no worse punishment than not being able to get away from what causes pain. That is the light. Sirius chooses to join the resistance even though it means living a half-life, a life with the only hope of clearing his name and to once and for all be a free man, maybe. There is a certain phrase that surprisingly does not appear in the books, but does so in the fifth film, and it goes like this. The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the path we choose to act on. That's who we really are. Now, I have selected an extract from the fifth film where this sentence is drawn from Sirius' lips, and I would like you to pay attention to it. So let me just show you the extract. Some of you might be familiar with it. Now, how do I go back? Okay, I need to share my screen now. This is going to be interesting. Okay, let me see. I'm going to allow this. Okay, can all of you see this? Yes? No? Perfect, thank you very much. Cool. Right. Let me go back to not sharing my screen. How do I go back? Here. Cool. Now, how do I go back to actually see my presentation?
Okay, so you need to click again on sharing content, sharing files.
Okay. Perfect.
And by the way, we couldn't actually hear, but that's okay because the automatically generated subtitles just told us what the dialogue was about, even though I think the President of the United States was mentioned and had nothing to do with it. But anyway, I think it was clear enough.
Sorry about that. I was just trying it
okay.
before, and the hearing was perfect. So I don't know what happened.
Yes,
there.
I know. I don't know what happened right there, but please carry on.
Sure. So I was the character, this one. Okay, cool. So now it's back to before, right?
Yes, that's
okay.
right.
Perfect. Oh, good. Sorry about that. It's a little bit messy, but I do hope that you guys are getting everything. Anyway, this clip, the one that I just shown you guys. By the way, there was mentioning that Sirius was 60, but no, he was 16. Imagine having to run away from your family at the age of 16. And also the Potters, I don't know what that is the Potters. So he ran away to the Potter's home because that was his home then. This clip precisely encompasses this unparalleled situation, this eternal erring of this character. Sirius chooses to err, chooses to remain enclosed, being deprived of his own freedom for the greater good, not for his own salvation. And that's where the fourth aspect of this paper comes into play, to choose, the choice which ultimately is ours. There needs to be a will to be a wanderer in a certain way. It is easier to stick to the predominant rule. However, if we fight against the established order, if we oppose obeying the rules, we will be advocated to wander between societies until they accept us or we accept ourselves. Sirius is nothing more than another metaphor which takes the form of the wanderer, adopting and adapting it, wandering from place to place. Yet how is the transgression reinterpreted in J.K. Rowling's novels? Sirius challenges the Dark Lord and everything he preaches. He who is considered the master, not by the will of all, but by imposition and terror. There we go. Sirius challenges him and loses. That is his sin, yet his great transgression, his punishment, but also his reward. Although it sounds ambivalent, this concept is transgression itself. By being defeated by the Dark Lord, Sirius is able to achieve light. Losing in this case means winning, for his name is cleansed. At the very instant that we as readers cry his death, we have forgiven Sirius. This is a very ambivalent aspect, as I said before, of the transgression. For the wanderer wants to stop the wandering by ending its life to either stop the suffering or to achieve redemption. However, Sirius, by not caring about his own life but others' life instead, will never be able to redeem himself completely, because for him dying does not mean redemption. His whole life has been fighting against his family views and those who followed them, embedded in his own surname, which even in death he still carries. Because of all these aspects, we come to the conclusion that a wanderer can have many different faces, but only one true essence, a marked existence, or body with a repentant and guilty mind within a fighting and kind soul. This persona would have committed the crime of breaking the established order, and the so-called transgression would have been established. To sum up, the condition of the wanderer could be said to have ambivalent characteristics, such as, for example, the almost sick desire to die and to cease to exist, a fact that cannot be fulfilled until the time comes. In this way, the long life is not more than a prolonged agony. But in the end, the wanderer is nothing more than the perfect metaphor to visualize guilt and despair. The crime of the wanderer symbolizes rejection towards himself, but also those who recognize him by his mark. However, this character also possesses more positive qualities, such as the fighting spirit and a repentant soul. And in the end, the appreciation of life is given because it is known to have an end. If the final peace could not be found, the road to trouble would be nothing more than a complete nonsensical wandering. And while it is true that the legend of the wanderer as such is not being discussed in this paper, this example shows a new perspective while analyzing both the wanderer and the character of Sirius Black, as both were punished for breaking the natural order of what was established, either in times when the world was of the divine Lord God or the Dark Lord, Lord Voldemort. We shall continue to analyze more Harry Potter's characters for the next occasion, but in the meantime, do think about which one of them was totally forgiven and had his name cleansed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nerea, for your very interesting talk. I also have like a couple of questions, but again, we'll wait till the very end. So now let's welcome our third speaker, who, as Maya said, is an organizer of the conference. Belén Galván is a postgraduate student at the University of the Basque Country, having graduated from the same university in philology, special mention in classics. She holds an MA in comparative literature and literary studies. She is currently developing her PhD research on the theme of death, from its representation on the Homeric poems to fantasy literature, and the way in which those traditions are adapted in the Harry Potter saga. Her research interests focus on the field of classical reception, especially on the relations between ancient Greek literature and fantasy. She has presented papers at national and international conferences on the presence of catabasic pattern in Harry Potter saga, and on the reception of authors' descent into the other world in the Twin Peaks TV series, among others. Last year, she was visiting researcher at the Open University Milton Keynes, UK. Today, she's going to talk about heroes, creators, and monsters, Aeschylus and Frankenstein in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows.
Thank you, Andoni. First of all, I would like to thank you also everyone for being here. So let's start with it. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the importance of the reception of Greek mythical and tragical patterns to the final outcome of the Harry Potter series. Specifically, I'm going to focus on the dialogue that Deathly Hallows establishes with the tragedy Libation Bearers by Aeschylus. But through this analysis, I want to raise another question, which is, when it comes to the dialogue with classical texts, to what extent do previous receptions of those texts color modern receptions? This is going to be exemplified by the ways in which Libation Bearers' presence in Deathly Hallows is linked to a previous text that actualized Aeschylus' tragedy in the 19th century, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So first of all, we're talking about reception. As probably you know, reception has a broad meaning. Its most famous is for looking at texts from the point of view of the readers or audiences and the ways in which they read, interpret, or respond to those texts, what is usually known as audience response. However, I'm going to be working with what is called textual reception, which, according to Ike Willis, analyzes the ways in which a text seeks to generate particular meanings and effects through references to earlier texts, or tracks the afterlife of a text through its later interpretations, adaptations, and appropriation. So, textual reception doesn't really care about the ways in which older texts influence new ones, but about the ways in which the new texts read and interpret the older ones.
Consequently, my interest is not to trace Aeschylus or Mary Shelley's influence on Harry Potter, but to observe the ways in which Harry Potter engages with libation bearers and Frankenstein, and how Frankenstein itself has changed our way to perceive and to use Greek tragedy. So, let's start with our main text. Deathly Hallows is the final novel of the Harry Potter saga. It's a very different book compared to the rest of the Iptology because the magical world is in danger. Voldemort has now taken control of the Ministry of Magic. Harry doesn't go back to school, but begins a kind of pilgrimage to find and destroy the Horcruxes, objects in which the Dark Lord has hidden fragments of his soul to evade death. He eventually returns to Hogwarts for a final battle against the forces of evil, and he finds out an uncomfortable truth, that he is the last container of the last fragment of Voldemort's soul. That means that Voldemort lives inside him, and that he must sacrifice himself, so die, if he wants to restore his enemy's mortality and make him vulnerable again. So Harry Potter is generally known for its massive web of allusions and its intertextuality with different texts from the classical, biblical, and English tradition. But Deathly Hallows in particular is a very complex novel in terms of intertextuality, because it refers constantly to the rest of the novels as it closes the whole story, and reflects in its pattern a constant dialogue with different texts that point out to Harry as a classical, Christian, or postmodern hero at the same time. Another thing that is special about Deathly Hallows is that for the first time in the whole saga, we encounter not one but two opening quotations. The first one corresponds to verses 466 to 478 of the tragedy Libation Bearers, composed by Aeschylus, and the second was extracted from Mock Fruits of Solitude by William Penn. This is important because even if Harry Potter as a whole is full of allusions, just think, for example, about the names such as Hermione, Sybil, or Sirius, as we have just seen, and so on. This is the first acknowledgement of a direct relationship with a specific text, more than just allusions to general mythology. Thus, we can suppose that they have a special importance for this last book. So, Libation Bearers is a tragedy composed in the 5th century before our era by the Greek tragedian Aeschylus, and is part of his Oresteia trilogy, focused on the myth of Orestes. So Orestes' Beat, which is probably known to all of you, tells us the story of the son of the king Agamemnon, Orestes, who must return home to avenge the death of his father, with the particularity of his mother being his father's assassin. So, to sum up, Orestes has to commit matricide, which in ancient Greece was a source of pollution and can be punished by the gods, if he wants to purify the death of his father, which is another source of pollution and is very likely to be punished too if left unavenged. Orestes' faith has been developed by different sources. Anyway, the quotation in Deathly Hallows is from Aeschylus' version of this myth, as developed in his trilogy The Oresteia, and particularly in Libation Bearers, which tells the homecoming of Orestes, his meeting with his sister Electra, and the mother of his mother, Clytemnestra. Libation Bearers' quotation orients our reading of Deathly Hallows as it points directly to the role of Harry as the avenger of his parents. He needs to defeat his parents' assassin in order to stop the chain of deaths that have affected his family, his closest friends, and the place where he feels like home, which is Hogwarts. As John Granger has pointed out, there are several parallelisms between the two heroes. For example, Harry is part of a trio of teenagers who plot to fulfill their missions. In the case of the myth, Orestes, his sister Electra, and his specialities. In Harry Potter, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. His mission is determined by a prophecy, and the lives of both heroes have been marked by the actions of tyrants. Clytemnestra is the creator of Orestes as a vengeance hero, while Harry wouldn't be the hero of the story if his parents hadn't been killed by Voldemort. Bretton Rogers has noted also that both Harry and Orestes act like saviors, liberating their communities from an unrightful ruler. Also, both Aeschylus, Orestes, and Harry are reluctant heroes that, even if convinced of the justice of their cause, do not want to harm others, feeling even compassionate towards their enemies. At the same time, this position of Harry as an Orestes-like figure is not just a simple inheritance, but a dialogue. Harry will not follow Orestes' steps, but actualize and rewrite Orestes' mission. One of the main differences is the nature of the hero's enemy. We can only consider Voldemort as Harry's progenitor from a metaphorical point of view. For example, as Terry Eagleton has said, while Orestes doesn't have alarming parallelisms with his mother as Harry does with Voldemort. Harry has a part of Voldemort inside him, and a part of Harry's journey consists in resisting the darkness within. Actually, Harry and Voldemort's mental connection and resemblances, so both are dark-haired, orphans, half-blood, and have been raised by muggles, make them more like a doppelganger to each other than family. The fact that this relationship between them is a product of Voldemort's experiments to avoid death makes their relationship something much closer to Frankenstein and his monster. So Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley and first published in 1818, tells the story of the scientist Victor Frankenstein, who gives life to a being of his own creation. However, the result is a hideous creature who is rejected by Victor and mankind in general. Due to this rejection, the monster ends up basically killing every person Victor loves. After that, Dr. Frankenstein decides to take responsibility for his creation and commits his life to pursue the monster and stop him. The relationship between Frankenstein and the monster has been analyzed in terms of creation and double nature. Victor is the creator of the new being, but later on the monster acts like Frankenstein's master, dominating the destiny of everyone that surrounds him and making Victor ultimately an avenger. At the same time, creator and creature are linked by their destiny, and the monster reflects everything that Victor wants and aims to dominate life and death. This relationship is analogous somehow to that of Harry and Voldemort, but with Voldemort being at the same time the monster and the creator of himself as a monster and of Harry as an Avenger hero. So the interest of a joint analysis of Frankenstein and libation bearers in Harry Potter does not rely on a simple interaction, but in the fact that Frankenstein itself is actualizing Aeschylus' tragedy. Ana González Rivas has studied the links between Mary Shelley's novel and Greek tragedy, not only through the allusions to the Prometheus myth, very clear in the novel by the novel's title, The Modern Prometheus, but also through its structure that includes and actualizes tragic tropes such as the tragic irony, the peripeteia or sudden change of luck of the protagonist, or the anagnorisis, which is the sudden discovery or recognition of the truth. Mary Shelley introduces an important variation of the pattern of vengeance, transforming it in a pursuit that reaches its highest level in the third volume of the novel, in which Frankenstein decides to pursue his creature, reversing the previous situation of being haunted by it. So we're going to see how the mixed receptions of this text determine Deathly Hallows' structure and give important clues to understand Harry and Voldemort's connection. If we have a look to Aeschylus' Libation Bearers, we can see that it has a return vengeance pattern that comes from myth, within anagnorisis, which is in this case the recognition between brother and sister, and a mehanema, which is a plan to fulfill their mission and manage to enter Clytemnestra's castle without arousing any suspicions. Frankenstein has a reverse pursuit, at first the monster pursues Frankenstein, then the other way around, that end up with a pattern of vengeance and pursuit in the third book. Deathly Hallows has a pursuit, a kind of pursuit and return pattern with a mehanema to enter the castle without arousing any suspicions, and a final anagnosis. So as we can see, Deathly Hallows is clearly divided in two parts. In the first one, Harry is out there in the forest while trying to seek pieces of Voldemort's soul locked in different objects to destroy him. Curiously enough, this is a reversal of the usual pattern in which Harry is pursued by Voldemort and not the other way around. In the second part, Harry goes back to the magical world to save it from the killer of his parents. In this final of the text, Harry suffers an anagnosis in which, in an old tragedy style, he discovers that he is a Horcrux and that he carries a part of Voldemort inside him, which transforms the fight against Voldemort into a fight against a part of himself. As we can see, these texts help to define Harry as a hero and point to interesting links between Harry and Voldemort. Specifically, the exploration of the double nature of the self is a key theme in Frankenstein and in Deathly Hallows. Victor and Harry must accept that there is a part of themselves inevitably bound to the monsters that have tormented them, and must sacrifice themselves if they want to defeat them. In both cases, the acceptance of the limitations of being human, not playing God, not seeking immortality, accepting death, plays a big role. In Deathly Hallows in particular, to defeat Voldemort, Harry must fight the part of himself that is not different from Voldemort, the part of himself that got excited when he learned about the Deathly Hallows and fantasized with being immortal. But is then the relationship between Harry and Voldemort a kind of an inversion of that on Frankenstein and the monster, but shaped in an Aeschylean pattern of vengeance? Not exactly. Voldemort and Harry's relationship becomes even more complicated when we take into account that they even mirror the same schemes of the Orestes myth. If Harry is a kind of an Orestes-like figure, Voldemort acts as a dark inversion of the great hero, as has been pointed out by Alice Miller. In Book 6, we learn that young Tom Riddle killed his father, not in vengeance for having abandoned his mother or anything, but for abandoning him. When he visits his father's tomb, it is not to gain strength, but to perform some dark magic of resurrection. And also, as Harry has a part of Voldemort living inside him, sometimes the limits between him and the Dark Lord gets blurred, especially in Deathly Hallows, to the point that in chapter 17, Harry gets lost inside Lord Voldemort's mind and revisits the killing of his parents from a first-person perspective, as if he had been the murderer. Actually, if we take a closer look to libation bearers, we can see that the apparent contradictions between this tragedy and role and septology are not as strong as they might seem at first sight. For example, Clytemnestra might be a mother and not a real monster, but then we can take a look into the parallelisms that the play suggests between her and a very famous serpentine monster, the Hydra, that Aeschylus introduces to highlight Clytemnestra's portrayal as a monstrous mother. Ultimately, this same image is going to be doubled in Orestes through a famous dream that Clytemnestra had, in which she saw herself nursing a snake, being that snake a symbol for Orestes. Therefore, the hero and the enemy can be understood through the Greek concept of pharmakon, that means at the same time the venom and the cure, because usually one is extracted from the other. We can see the same parallel in Harry Potter in the relationship between Harry and Voldemort, being both associated with snakes, animals they can talk to. Ultimately, both texts rebound in a very potent mythical image, the hero that kills a serpentine monster. So, we have seen how libation bearers and Frankenstein's reception in Deathly Hallows play an important role in its structure and in Harry's construction as a hero. Through this intertextual relationship, Harry is defined as a tragic and a Gothic hero. Rowling continues with the Gothic tendency of placing the conflict inside oneself, highlighting a dual constitution which can only be solved with the destruction of the monstrous part. Voldemort, as the monster, represents the inhuman consequences of avoiding death, Therefore, the only way of killing the Voldemort within is the voluntary choice of dying, echoing Frankenstein's commitment to live only as long as he can defeat the monster. This analysis also shows the complex dynamics of reception. The relationship between libation bearers, Frankenstein, and Deathly Hallows is not that of influence, or not just that of influence, but of dialogue. One of the key points here is the fact that the only intertext that J.K. Rowling is recognizing in her book is libation bearers. But while some of the characteristics that we encounter in Deathly Hallows are analogous somehow with Aeschylus' play, there are others that need the Gothic turn, and specifically Mary Shelley's reinterpretation of Greek tragedy to be understood. Thus, classical reception specifically addresses a reality that must be taken into account, the fact that modern reinterpretations of classical texts can influence our reading of the classics as much as the classics can help us to shape our modern ideas of the world. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Belen, for your interesting talk. So right now, I think we can start the Q&A session. Okay, we already have some questions. So you can either raise your hand, clicking on the right-hand side button at the bottom of the screen, or you can just write down your comments and then I can read them aloud for the different speakers. Right.
She can ask the question using a microphone if she likes.
Yes, yes. So I think that that Maite can start with her first question.
Hi, ¿puedo hacer la pregunta en castellano? Que si no me voy a volver loca.
Por supuesto.
Vale, gracias. Es para Nagore, que ha hablado sobre brujas y Sabrina. Que ha habido un momento en el que a mí me ha gustado mucho que se introduzca en un congreso como este el tema de las brujas, porque bueno, es un tema del que no se suele hablar mucho, sobre todo en relación con la caza de brujas y de la representación de las brujas. Entonces, por esa parte, agradezco mucho a Nagore, a la ponente, que se haya metido en este berenjenal, porque es una cosa muy compleja. En lo que respecta a mi pregunta y a mi duda, había un momento en el que has dicho igual ha sido sin querer, o sea, ha sido una cosa que, esta cosa que estás hablando y no exactamente lo que querías decir, igual te he entendido mal yo, que también puede ser, porque bueno, mi inglés no es perfecto, ni muchísimo menos. La cosa es que en un momento dado has dicho que la caza de brujas no era o no fue un suceso, o sea, has dicho it was a not gendered thing, si no me equivoco. Cuando, si igual es, o sea, entonces me gustaría saber si es eso lo que has dicho. Y si es así, si conoces la obra de Silvia Federici y de otras feministas que han aludido a la caza de brujas como el primer gran feminicidio de la historia. Entonces, es respecto a eso, o sea, no sé si he entendido bien.
Vale. Hola Maite. Bueno, no sé, shall I answer in Spanish, English? Doesn't matter. I don't know. The one she prefers. Bueno, así que
English, if you can.
English better.
If Maite doesn't.
Okay.
If Maite doesn't mind.
I don't matter.
You don't care. Okay. So basically, yes, I know these authors that you have mentioned, and that's actually what I'm doing in my PhD. It's quite of it's an eternal debate. There are lots of authors who say that is gender specific or is not gender specific. So there is a huge debate going on about this. I agree that it was a huge problem for women, but it's true that it wasn't only for women, because there were a lot of men who were also killed. Of course, mainly women, we agree on that. But as there were also men, that's why I said in English, like, it can't be considered exactly gender, like an gender issue, because it wasn't only a gender issue, there were many factors. But basically, yeah, that is my answer, that as there were also men who were killed, of course, related to these women. Maybe that was the reason why I said, like, it wasn't a gender issue. I don't know if it's clear or not.
Sí, 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 sí,
Yeah.
entiendo. Me sigue pareciendo problemático, o sea, entiendo
Yeah,
y
I
me
know, I
sigue
know.
pareciendo problemático porque, por ejemplo, cuando has empezado tu comunicación, que por cierto me ha parecido súper interesante todo el abanico de representaciones audiovisuales que has hecho respecto a las brujas y cómo han ido cambiando y cómo ha ido cambiando su representación a lo largo del
Yeah.
tiempo, de la historia, como quieras decir. Me ha parecido muy interesante que empieces con la representación clásica de las brujas, como una señora mayor con la nariz muy grande, las verrugas, incluso la del mago de Oz, que es verde y con el sombrero y todo esto. Cuando por eso digo que me parece problemático, porque esa representación clásica o tradicional, como se le quiera llamar, que se hace de las brujas, lo que pretende es demonizar no solo a las mujeres, sino también a las mujeres mayores que ya rompen, o sea, que ya no son, que dejan de ser ciudadanas productivas. Me explico. Bueno, ya me has dicho que tú sí conoces las teorías de la memoria de las brujas, pero otras igual no. Entonces, lo que venían a decir estas teorías es que la caza de brujas responde a un cambio en la historia al final de la Edad Media, cuando entra en juego lo que luego llamaremos capitalismo. Entonces, ese cambio económico y político, incluso el que produce este asesinato masivo, este genocidio masivo de mujeres, que no tiene otro fin que el de limitar la presencia femenina en el mundo, en el ámbito público, y relegarla al ámbito privado, porque el sistema capitalista se nutre sobre todo de la mano de obra. Y entonces, ¿quiénes son las que tienen que crear esa mano de obra? Son las mujeres. Y me estoy enrollando, ya lo siento. Bueno, entonces eso. Entonces, ¿qué necesitan? Necesitas mujeres jóvenes que están en edad de procrear para que crean la mayor cantidad de mano de obra posible. ¿Cuáles son las que impiden esa creación masiva de mano de obra para nutrir el capitalismo? Son las mujeres mayores, y sobre todo mujeres mayores que tienen conocimientos de profilaxis o de control natalicio. Y contra eso es contra lo que va la caza de brujas. Entonces, volviendo otra vez a mi por eso me parece problemático decir que la caza de brujas, a pesar de que es verdad, afectó principalmente a mujeres, aunque no solamente, porque también afectó a muchísimos niños y niñas, que es una cosa que se suele olvidar y es importante recordar. También en la caza de brujas también fueron asesinados hombres, y eso hay que tenerlo en cuenta también. Pero yo creo que en esos casos, cuando había hombres que se veían afectados por la caza de brujas, es porque en muchas ocasiones se mascaraba como caza de brujas, porque no olvidemos que la bruja es un constructo cultural y social para demonizar a mujeres empoderadas, que también, o sea, estas mujeres empoderadas estaban también relacionadas con movimientos sociales y políticos que hoy llamaríamos antisistema. Entonces, por eso se mataba también a hombres, pero la caza de brujas está dirigida específicamente contra las mujeres. Por eso me parecía problemático el decir que no tiene género, digamos, que no sé cómo decirlo especialmente. O sea, el inglés por ejemplo, se usa mucho mejor. Por eso me parecía problemático.
Sí, solemos decir que no es solo de género, básicamente, pero, o sea, porque obviamente, pues, por lo que hemos dicho, que había hombres, niños, por eso, básicamente, pero obviamente sí, claro, por eso.
Pero la finalidad de todo esto es es genérico, o sea, es de género, es eso, es...
Sí, claro, obviamente se demonizó esa imagen, o sea, obviamente, y al final es todo de lo mismo, o sea, fue un constructo de alguna forma para eliminar ciertas personas, pero también se eliminaban a, pues no sé, a gente que vivía en la calle, incluso siendo hombres o mujeres. Entonces, por eso me refería a que muchas autoras tienen problema con este término, porque claro, no es solo de género realmente, porque es algo más histórico, es un poco de todo, pero al mismo tiempo, pues eso también, obviamente, un feminicidio, sí, claro.
Pues muchas gracias. O sea, me ha encantado tu ponencia porque eso, porque me parece muy importante este tema. Yo tengo que decir que yo no me dedico a esto, aunque te lo pueda parecer por este apabullamiento y por esta verborrea que sí que me caracteriza. Pero bueno, hay diferentes asociaciones que por si te interesa, en Madrid hay una asociación que se llama La Memoria de las Brujas que está muy potente. Y en el País Vasco también hay diferentes grupos porque ahora ha habido como un repunte de intentar hacer algo y bueno, yo pertenezco a uno de estos grupos de Pamplona, por eso sé algo y por eso he estudiado algo. Entonces, lo que sí que te quería recomendar incluso, porque lo leí en su momento y me pareció muy interesante, aunque ahora mismo no tengo el título, es una tesis doctoral que presentó creo que presentó una chica, no sé en qué universidad, sobre cómo se había transformado la imagen de brujas, hechiceras o incluso y hechiceras, no solo, o sea, que no tuviera un esto negativo a lo largo de la historia, desde la antigua Grecia, con personajes como Circe, hasta las películas que has enseñado tú. Y cómo había transformado el siglo XIX, cómo cambia todo esto a las vampiras y tal. Entonces era muy interesante. No lo tengo aquí, lo tendría que buscar. Pero estás interesada, me conoce Belén y que te pase mi mail o algo porque te puedo pasar. O sea,
Vale.
esa tesis doctora es muy interesante, sobre todo por la iconografía.
Vale, muchas gracias.
A ti.
So now I think Nayara has a question.
Yes, hello. First of all, thank you for your interesting presentations. I really enjoyed them all. My question is for Nagoretsu. My focus is also on witches, is also gendered, but I don't know that much about them, but here is my question. You said that the soul's charge of the night emulates the hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church. Do you think that this is because the apparently unquestionable figure of Satan is a metaphoric or satiric representation of the tyrannical and patriarchal power of the Christian God? And do you think that, as a consequence, the self-proclaimed feminist Sabrina, by questioning the blind faith that witches have in Satan's obscure plan, also questions the Catholic patriarchal order that historically has victimized and demonized women by punishing them for being mad, bewitched, or rather free-willed?
Thank you for the question. It's very interesting. Actually, in the TV show, it's very funny how whenever you see a coven of witches, and this is something historical, normally there were women. And here we have women and men. And of course, the Church of the Night is somehow male, like in the sense of most of the highest priests and all these people who are very important are male. And it's actually divided. So we have also the normal witches, and then we have, I think it's called the Judas Society, which is all men. So it's very interesting. Yeah, of course, Satan is somehow a satiric image, we would say, of God. And I think that's why in this show, they are always making like all these comments and all remarks about God being the fake God, as in Satan being the real God and not God. So yeah, of course, I think it's basically doing that. And of course, Sabrina is she's a huge feminist. She's fighting not only in her magic words is also fighting in her normal world as a human, and she's creating all this organization for women, and she's fighting for the rights of all women to be the same, and she's fighting Satan because she wants to be free and she wants to be a rebel. Basically, I think there is a quote that she says that is, I don't want to be a witch, I want to be free to decide if I want to be a witch. So it's very interesting. Of course, yes, the patriarchy is really, really present in this TV show. And it's quite funny because it's a feminist show, we could say, but still they are making the Coven mainly male, we would say. I don't know if I answered your question, Nayara.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I also saw, I think that only the first season or the second one.
Okay.
And I also enjoy the figure of Lilith, and sometimes Arena is like also being Eve, because if I remember well, it's also in the boots, and suddenly we see a tree with the apples, and I think that she picks one, and yeah, thank you. That this is very interesting, and I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your question.
So I have a question which would be both for Nerea and Belen. So in a way, both presentations deal with comparative analysis and also in a way source studies. If I remember rightly, I think that Rowling was a student of classics at the University of Exeter. But do we know to which extent she also had to study the sources you've been talking about? Not in particular for Belen, since that's clear that that may have been on the syllabus. But what about like English literary sources? Do we know if she actually took any course on that as part of the program?
Hi, shall I go first?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Right, well, thank you very much for your question, Danny. To be fair, I have read kind of like her biography, and she studied French studies, and then some classics as well. She will always regret not having studied English, just because her parents told her not to. Mainly her dad. So up to the point that I know of, because of her biography, she wanted to study English, but then she didn't. So I don't really know if she then obviously she had, because if she's interested in something, you're going to find the time out of your studies and your academical life to do whatever you enjoy doing, right? Your passion. So if she was really passionate about English literature and she was a really avid reader, she definitely found time to read the classics and even some other authors. Although, and she was very adamant to give specific titles of the authors that she's read, or even based herself or Harry Potter novels, because she didn't, and these are her words, she didn't want other authors or academics to say, oh, okay, so now I can see the connection. She didn't want that. She just wanted kind of like a blank canvas for people to be free up to a certain extent and to analyze Harry Potter freely. But again, that's why it's all assumptions. We cannot really tell specifically which authors she based herself when writing about Harry Potter. And if I recall exactly, some years ago in one of the, I think it was the British Museum, I don't know where exactly, but in London a couple of years ago, there was an exposition and a showroom, and she had some of the manuscripts that she had been all the ideas and phrases and even chapters about Harry Potter. So you could see certain links in those manuscripts. But again, sadly, I was not able to attend such event. So I don't know. I mean, I personally wouldn't be able to tell, oh, this is definitely one of the books that she read and then took advantage of or even used to write Harry Potter. What about you, Belen? Do you have any further ideas about this?
Well, I basically agree with all that you've said. The only thing that I think that I can add to the conversation is basically two things. I think that we are dealing here also with very famous stories, and especially in English culture. I mean, the Gothic stories are very well known. So I don't know if we can assure that she has read, for example, Frankenstein or any other novel that portrays the Wandering Jew or anything, but I am sure that she knows them, and I'm sure that she has been in contact with them. So I don't know to what extent she does. She makes these references consciously or unconsciously, but I am very sure that they are, so to speak, like in the air. And definitely, Harry Potter has a lot of Gothic features. So I don't know which novels exactly she has read, but definitely there is something there, basically.
Mm-hmm. I would go even further, and I would state that whatever she has done, she definitely has not done it unconsciously. She has put a great time and effort into writing Harry Potter. Obviously, there's going to be links that then afterwards, with the passing of the time and years, then we're going to be analyzing them from different perspectives, and you can get to see and say, oh, okay, then this link might be possible. And it might have been just a mere share of luck, but it is definitely, I can definitely assure, I personally would assure that whatever she did in those novels, she did it consciously. And then whatever the reader or readers take out of those novels, it's up to them, obviously, but she definitely put a lot of time and thought into those novels.
Yeah, that's correct. Although it's true that sometimes we, as researchers, sometimes want to not to assure certain things, not to have people saying, "Oh, but what have you said or what have you done?" So, but yeah, it's true that when you begin to analyze, it's true that you encounter so many things that she would have needed a lot, as you said, a lot of luck to make that in an unconscious manner, definitely.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And also, I think this is something that we unconsciously, as readers and writers as well, we do, which it's kind of impossible or very difficult to stop doing, but we should try our best to stop doing, which is whenever we read a novel or even a poem, we tend to analyze it from the author's perspective. Oh, was she thinking about this? Were they thinking about that? La 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 la. But to be fair, we can only relate the piece of art that we have in front of us with the author up to a certain extent. We cannot completely and very closely relate it 100%, because then obviously every novel would just be an autobiography or something like that. Maybe a bizarre one, but an autobiography in the end. And that's not what the author intended. Otherwise, in this case, she would have written an autobiography, and she didn't. So there is going to be some links from her own life. Yes, definitely, they're there. In this case, authors, type of books, genres, her own lifestyle, the depression that she went through. Yes, definitely, they're going to be there. But exactly which ones, and then analyzing the novels through those lenses, I think that's the mistake that all of us, and I include myself, do at some point in our lives. So yeah.
So I was thinking, So nobody has actually delved into the University of Exeter archives and looked at the syllabus already? I'm just asking because it's quite easy to do, especially Exeter being a modern university, and you could actually compile a list of courses that she may have attended during her time over.
That's a really interesting way of approaching the subject. I personally don't know if anybody has done that. I have read books and novels that have dealt with different authors, and they think that these were the authors that at least she read them, so she liked them, she enjoyed them, and has spoken about them in different interviews, like Jane Austen, for example. There's not denying that, but no, I actually think, to my knowledge, there's not such a list. I don't know, and that's actually, I don't know if it is something to do because she took a really, good care in making her own life very, very private. I mean, it's a widely known fact that she had used lawyers in the past for several different reasons, even against the fans. So this is true. I mean, she is a very private person. She has endured a lot in her life, and she doesn't want her life to be completely public. She only allows to be public whatever she feels like making public. So maybe, I'm assuming, if there's not such a record, it might be because she has either paid the university to not allow anybody to access these sort of records, or she deleted them. I don't know. I definitely don't know. But I myself was in Exeter University, and I wasn't able to access any. So
I don't know if anyone has tried to do that. The only thing that I've read that might be similar to that, what you're saying, is just this an article by Brett and Rogers where he compared the use that J.K. Rowling made of the Oresteia in Deathly Hallows, specifically in the figure of the tyrant, and then he researched a little bit about that, and he said that one of her professors of Greek tragedy was a specialist on the figure of the stage tyrant, and he made a comparison with the studies of that professor that maybe, of course, were known to her, or he had been explaining them in class or something. But apart from that, it's true that I haven't looked at them.
But thank you very much for the answers. Thank you, and thanks for the source.
thank you, Andoni.
So are there any further questions for the panelists?
I myself have a question for Nagore, actually. Maybe this is just I don't even know how to ask this question, but so Nagore, you did mention something about the witch's mark. So because I deal with marks as well, body and mind, I was just wondering, does the mark on the witch, does it disappear once they die, or once they stop being witches, or does it change throughout their lives as witches, or does it have any alteration?
I think it doesn't change. Like they get it when they make the pact with the devil, and supposedly it stays there forever. I mean, normally they hang witches or they burn witches, so I don't really know if it actually disappears when they die. I don't think so, personally, because of the pact of the soul that they make. But no, I don't think they change. Actually, it's just the same shape, and yeah, it's like a mole. Normally it was like a mole or a birthmark or a scar or freckle, something like that. But yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did, definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So if nobody else has any other question, I would like to ask one to Nagore. Is there anyone who would like to? Right. So Nagore, could you please talk a little bit about the medieval manuscript that you showed? I think it was on your first slide. Just about like the name, description, like what are the contents and all that. I couldn't take down the name.
Can you hear me? Okay, no. Yeah, it was. It's a French document, I believe. Yeah. It's from Martin Lefrancis, and it's called Le Champion des Dames. And basically, I haven't read the whole thing. Like I only read that part that is there, basically. But they have like little witches drawn in the margins of this manuscript. And yeah, of course, they talk about the issue there, basically. But I don't know any further thing. Like I don't really know. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the reference. I didn't know about that, and it's really useful. Thanks.
Thanks for the question.
Are there any other further questions? I would also like to ask another question to Nagore. This is related to her PhD dissertation. I'm just curious on the way that the representation of the witch has changed from The Witch of Edmonton and Arthur Miller's The Crucible to nowadays.
How it has been.
Yeah, like what kind of difference can you see from these traditional? Well, actually, The Witch of Edmonton is a lot older than Arthur Miller's and is over the pond. But
yes, they are. Yeah.
What difference can you see also like between The Witch of Edmonton and Arthur Miller's The Crucible as well?
Okay. Well, basically, I don't know if you have read The Witch of Edmonton. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, there are many differences on the whole play. The fact that in The Witch of Edmonton we only have one witch, while in The Crucible we have this hysteria, this group hysteria. Then of course the whole play, because I think as it was written in different periods, like it has different ways of being. Like for example, the first one, we see the little dog. I think it was a dog. I don't remember properly. That was the devil, right? And he was causing all this distress. But in the other one, in Arthur Miller's, we have more like all the hysteria. We have the trials. And here, no, we don't have a trial, for example, in The Witch of Edmonton, which is very interesting because it's like, okay, she's a witch, we kill her. Probably because of the period, basically. And of course, both of these plays have the traditional witch, basically, which is the witch that I have mentioned in my presentation, with the familiar and the witch mark and everything. And little by little, this has been changing both in literature and in the film industry. And it's very interesting how they simply lose these elements. Like, I don't know, it's just like they are scared of having this type of characters who are so evil or so anti-human, because of course we can't have, I don't know, a Harry Potter, for example, who eats people. That would be really scary for children and even for adults, right? It's not the common thing. So I think that little by little they have started dropping these concepts, and instead they have taken like a better, like a friendlier witches or wizards, just to, I don't know if it's only to please the public, I suppose so. But of course they have maintained it. I mean, especially in film industry, we can see how in horror films, it's very common to see all these witches who kill people and they are evil. And yeah, basically in horror films, and I think in fairy tales, they maintain this same pattern, but in the rest, they have been changing it, except for now that they are still like they are now going back to what was fashionable, or yeah.
Thank you for the answer. Yeah, it's also interesting because in The Crucible is the only work that you've mentioned where there are no witches at all.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
in this case, it's more to do with other things rather than witches. It's just an excuse. But yeah, it's very interesting. So you see that the portrayal from a feminist perspective, the portrayal also has changed, right?
Yeah.
You
yeah,
see
of
that
course.
evolution.
They are making the witch, of course, more empowered, and of course, she's not scared of having that power. So we have these witches who they do what they have to do. They don't care about the means. That doesn't mean that they are bad or that they are good. They are simply human and they make mistakes, but they also have their own reasons to make these mistakes. So it's very interesting how it's changing little by little.
Willing to read your thesis.
Of
Looks
course,
very
of course.
interesting.
Okay, thank you for the question.
So I think we can call it off unless someone else has any further comments or questions. Right, so just big round of applause to everyone, especially to our panelists who have brought very interesting topics and delivered very good presentations.
Thank you very much.
And it's been a pleasure to chair this panel.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andoni.
Thank you, Andoni. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Andoni.
Agore, Nerea, everybody.
Thank
Okay,
you, guys.
So, if you like, I'll see you at 3 o'clock.